So my last video was about principles, systems and techniques. It was initially supposed to be an introduction to this particular principle, but I kind of got a bit carried away, so whatever. So the principle I want to talk to you about today is something that I learned from Demian Maia way back in the day from the Excellent Science of Jiu-Jitsu set. I cannot for the life of me remember what he calls it. I think it's the block, or it might be the wedge or something. I think it's the block. But the same principle I've seen much more recently. Gordon Ryan talks about this a lot in his DVDs. Danaher, I think, refers to this sort of thing. Brett Mickelson as well in his like defense-based DVDs. Sal Ribeiro shows this sort of stuff too. It's something that keeps coming around because there's this good fundamental, like principled, conceptually sound jiu-jitsu, right? It's a principle of a block or a closed elbow. So if I am sitting and defending a guard pass, right, I want my elbows and my knees to remain connected and to basically block the space where my ribs are. Like if you ever see like nature documentaries, you see, let's say, wolves or lions like fighting for dominance. Like what usually ends the fight is when one animal is rolled over and its soft underbelly is exposed, right? Rolling over, giving up and presenting your belly, it's kind of a sign of submission or weakness. In Jiu-Jitsu, obviously it's not what we consider a submission, but it is a sign that they have reached a dominant position. Think about in side control, bring them out here. Right, what we're looking at doing for side control is getting between the space of his knees, not that my dummy has knees, and his armpit. We want to get in here, we want to be able to get this tight chest-to-chest connection. Right, it's the same with me on belly. I want to be in this space between where his knees are and where his arms are. Right, think about how different this would be if his arms were in the way of my knee. It's much easier for him to frame and push me off. Here, side control as well. If his arms are in place, especially if he's protecting his head as well, right, you can easily frame and keep me off him. Same thing for the mount. Like, if I'm on top in mount, I'm in this space here. I've beaten his legs. I'm in this gap here, especially if I'm high knees right up in his armpits. Can't close his arms. It's very hard for him to push me off. Even if he's got his knees inside his elbows inside my knees, suddenly the game is very, very different because he can start opening this gap here, right? If I'm on top of his arms, this is even worse because he can push away, create space, right? He can keep me off him. It's a very, very different game if he can keep me from getting actually into the space between his armpits and his knees, between his elbows and his knees, right? Very, very, very important principle. So, how does this apply and where does it apply? Right, so if I'm sitting and defending a guard pass here, right, if my opponent is in front of me here, I'm keeping my arms and legs in play, right? Even if I don't have contact with him, I want this kind of frame here and connection, so it's harder for him to move and separate me. If he moves my arm, moves my leg, and my arm is in connection too, everything moves together, my whole body starts to move. My leg is isolated and he starts moving it here. Right, see how this creates a space. If he pulls this here and I move, right, my leg and my arm follow, my whole body turns, and I still have frame in between me and him. If he starts moving around to the outside here, right, I want to keep my hips in line with my opponent. As he moves around here, he's now outside of the line of my guard, right? Here, this is where I want him to be, but if he's coming at me from this angle here, still very hard for him to connect and take side control because my arm and my knee and my elbow are close together. So even if he tries to drop his weight here, there's a solid frame. If he comes directly on top, I have everything in place. I'm going to keep his weight off me pretty easily, and he hasn't passed my guard, even though he might be sort of past the line of my hips. From the side, if he starts pushing me, or if he comes down this side, starts pushing, there's a solid frame, he's just going to push me over towards turtle here. right? And yes, it's exposing my back, but then also, let's think about it, if he's attacking my back here, right, it's a big difference between me sitting here, with my arms up, my knees like exposed here in this gap here. This is where he's going to start getting his seatbelt, he's going to start getting his hooks in. Much easier for him to attack. If I'm sitting here, everything's tight and well defended, you can see right now, it's going to be very hard for him to get his hooks in here, right, or to even get his seatbelt in, because I'm defending and I have this solid block here. So defensively, this is very, very important. Right, I'm keeping my knees and my elbows tight together. I'm reducing the space here, and importantly here, right, this is another principle like the closed or open elbow and also connection we're talking about here. If my elbow is wedged in tight, I can use the entirety of my back musculature to keep this all in tight. And normally I'd have someone like try and pull my arm away from my body here. It's generally pretty hard to do. If my arm is separate from my body, now it's pretty much just my shoulder muscles working to keep this in place. Right, it's much easier to move this around when my arm is isolated. Legs are stronger, but the same thing remains. It's easier to pry the leg apart, or pry the leg away from your body if it's isolated. If I have a frame of reference here, which is knee to elbow, I can connect the two. I can almost push them in together. Right, so now I'm not just using my arm, I'm using the musculature on my back and my leg, keeping everything solid and tight. Right? It's much harder for him to move, separate this, because I'm using both the muscles of my leg and my arm to connect this together, so everything's moving more in unison. Right? So I can't remember exactly what he said about this, because I watched that video a very, very long time ago, but this principle applies almost everywhere in Jiu-Jitsu. I was lucky in a way to have a series of bad shoulder injuries, which led to me rolling with my arm held super, super tight to my body. Right? There's an old saying in Jiu-Jitsu, keep your friends close and your elbows closer. Right? Keep your arms in super tight at all times. It makes it very hard for you to be attacked. Right? Especially in the early days, you want to be very good at keeping your arms in. As I said before, like when you're attacking an opponent from mount or side control, you want to isolate their arm to make it easy to attack. If you're defending, you want to isolate that arm. You want to keep them from isolating your arm, right? So it's a very, very important thing, like keeping your arms tidy and in tight. Connected here, very, very strong structural position here. So very, very important to keep arms and knees connected. Now, like all principles, when you go up the belts, you're going to find times when you need to separate your arms from your body, and I had a slightly harder time because I had a lot of like mental hang-ups about sticking my arm away from my body. I was afraid I'd get injured, right? But I had a very, very solid foundation to build on, which was it's very hard for people to get past this line of defence. Arm, leg, knee and elbow connected here. Very, very hard for people to break that down. It was hard for me to expand past that, but like all principles, you need to know when to let go of it and move on to the next one. But at an early stage especially, it's very, very hard to go wrong with having your elbows tucked in and having your knee and your elbow connected together. Think about the difference between like passing guard as well. Like if someone is sitting here with their arms and legs spread out, right, a guy like this is going to be an easy target for a good guard passer. There's a lot of space for him to step. Arms are vulnerable to arm drags, legs to be picked, whatever. If I'm tucked in here, it's much harder for him to come in like safely and get a grip without me also getting a counter grip too. Right? Even though here I might be pushing an opponent out a lot further, here I might be able to keep him at a safer distance. Right? It feels safer because he's further away, but actually what I'm doing is I'm spreading myself out, stretching myself out and making myself more vulnerable. And if I'm compact, I have everything in here. I'm forcing him to come into a range where I can get a much more solid connection, more solid series of connections on him here. Right? Same thing applies to playing on top, right? Guard passing, very, very important as well. Or defending the guard here, right? Going back slightly, think about mount defences here. when we do our elbow escape here, they're mounted on top of us, right? They're between our knee and our elbow. What we're looking to do is reconnect the space here. As I connect my knee to my elbow here, right, I'm getting underneath from here. When I shrink back out, if I do one side here and connect knee and elbow, right, now if I manage to do this, my opponent might be sitting on top of me, but he's on top of this frame here. Right, I can start pulling him back into guard much easier. Very, very important part. Like, bring that knee to the elbow when you're escaping from side control as well. Here, we bridge up here, we shrimp out, we connect knee to elbow. Suddenly, there's no space for him to maintain that side control. Like, very, very important part. You just keep that in mind. It's going to do lots of good for you. When we're passing as well, here, right, I'm standing over my opponent, I've got this space here. This is where I get very, very vulnerable to arm drags here. I expose his gap, expose his leg, right? It's much easier for him to shoot in, take these singles here. When I'm passing as well, from like a knee slice or whatever here, I want to keep this gap closed because I don't want him to underhook and start working his way towards my back, right? I want to keep this arm and this leg tight here when I'm passing. So now it's very, very hard for him to get good connection on my leg. Right, he can't wrap it up in the same way because as he shoots into my leg, my arm is here as well. Can't arm drag because my arm is tight here. If he moves me, he's going to move my whole body, right? And I'm defending the same space here, like between my hip and my armpit, between my knee and my elbow. Really, really important to keep this defended here. Right, so Demian Maia calls it block, I think. Gordon Ryan talks a lot about this knee to elbow connection here. It's a hugely important part of the game, like very, very fundamental in your defense, and also keeping yourself tight while you're still trying to go on the attack as well. So think about protecting this space here, and how we're doing it. It's by keeping our knees and our elbows connected to each other, keeping them tight towards our bodies here, right? Much harder to attack. A solid defense. The more you force them to work, right, the more gaps are going to leave for you to escape. If you have a solid defense, you can trust that. The easier it's going to be for you to open up on the offense. So this principle, I think it's called the block here. Here, even turtle here, defending the back here, right, even in closed guard here, closed guard top. I don't want to leave a massive gap here. Obviously I'm not keeping one up it unless I've already split the guard, but even sitting in closed guard here and keeping the space tight so they can't reach up, underhook, all of this here, right. Very, very important. Keep that in mind. See other situations where that might apply to whatever guard games or guard passes, any part of Jiu-Jitsu that seems applicable to you. Have fun with that, guys. Try and keep that in mind. Remember, principles are super, super important. Just gives you one thing to think about instead of a whole bunch of things.